So I did just borrow this camera from our used section at Camera Centre UK, and it's a camera I've been looking at having a go with for a little while anyway, and that is of course the Fujifilm X-E2. Now I really do quite like the X Pro series, and Fujifilm, if you're watching, please create another one, or at least create another one of these. Amazing, so we started off a journey here today. This is just inside of Cardiff Park, and well, let's grab this photo as it's quite pretty, isn't it? And it's just got some of that beautiful Fujifilm colour science, which means you can just get some absolutely stunning looking images. Of course, this is on the cheaper end of the Fujifilm lineup. They've been around about £500 for the body. Put the actual price up now, and it's just a lot of fun in general. Now, Fujifilm, what I'd love to see from you is an update to the X-E2, because I like the X Pro, but it's just that little bit too big, and this it's just kind of almost the perfect size. So the X-E2 is a little bit older now. The X-E1's actually got quite popular recently, just because it was from the older sensor days and the older Fujifilm sensors. What I would say about the X-E2 series, and comparing it to my favourite camera from Fujifilm of recent, the XM5, is I really would have liked a viewfinder like this on the XM5. Now the camera is a little bit on the older side now. Overall, I would say shooting with it, or as far as I've shot with it today and yesterday, the photos out of the camera, just in general, just look really quite fantastic. Of course, stick around to the end of the video where we go over the image quality a little bit more. And this is another one of Stuart's. Oh, there's something nice in Camera Centre, and I want to go take some photographs with it. Yeah, need a jingle for these kind of videos. They're a little bit more off the cuff. I guess I can talk a little bit more about photography whilst also talking about the camera itself. But yeah, so when it came to the X-E2, it is a rangefinder format camera. I haven't got that hybrid EVF like the X100s do, and also the X Pro series, but you got kind of all the other bells and whistles, including Fujifilm's iconic kind of like design language, being more kind of film-esque in its approach to how it handles things. You got the ability to change all of the shutter speeds at the top, as well as your meter mode. I believe I have this in full manual at the moment, and it's shooting at f2. I'm actually shooting today with an 18mm f2 because I wanted to see more kind of like form factor to be relatively discreet. So here we have it. You got your shutter dial on the top that allows you to change the shutter speed. You got your shutter button, which actually allows you to screw in old style kind of like pokey shutters, which is pretty cool. You got on and off switch there. You got a function dial that actually allows you to use the Wi-Fi inside of the camera, which is pretty fantastic. You got the automatic meter setting here, so if you are shooting AV like I am today, you can really easily change that, and it's not too far out of the realm of, you know, generally being able to use. On the back, you've got a whole heap of just general settings, including a function button too, as well as your drive mode. You're checking out your photos, your thumbnails, and all your AAF kind of like switches there, as well as the Q button, which allows you to get into the quality and all of the other kind of like quick menu settings that you kind of want to access as quick as possible, essentially. This does have one of the W126S battery inside of it, and the battery so far has been pretty fantastic, and you've also got a lovely little flash. So when it is quite light outside, quite dark outside, you got the ability to use the flash, and it's not going to do absolutely anything today because it's freaking bright out. But we're going to be doing some street photography in and around Cardiff, and unlike the last couple of videos, I'm going to try sort of like a hybrid fashion to this. I'm going to be using both the Pocket 3, the X5, and also, you know, my FX3, and shoot some cool content to kind of build out this video a little bit more. But without further ado, let's get into the video and actually start shooting in and around Cardiff, shall we? Now, when it comes to Fuji, I've been debating whether to switch over to Fuji for my day-to-day kind of shooting, because I've enjoyed a number of their cameras recently. Main one being of that, the what was it? The XM5. When I'm pretty much sold on an XM5, I just got to really, you know, take the actual plunge for it. What I really like about Fuji is, of course, the colours, the feel. The GFX 100 RF is one of the best cameras I've ever used, and I got some of the photos that, you know, I'm actually really quite proud of. And it was the same for the XM5. I actually tried out the XM5 in London when it was originally released, and even at the time I was only able to actually edit the JPEGs, but the photos are absolutely blooming gorgeous. Now, I'm not saying I'm the best photographer in the world, far from it, but I know when a camera is good. I know if I like a photo or not, and I was actually really quite happy with them. Of course, the thing is, when it comes to getting into photography, doing street photography, or finding your own little niches, just really got to give everything a go. Just ultimately have fun with it. I've been doing a little bit more street photography, more and more these days, because it kind of gives me the ability to kind of express my freedom. But also, I think I just came across a drug dealer. The camera is, of course, a 16 megapixel APS-C size sensor, and it falls within the sort of like older generational sensors from Fujifilm that have actually been quite sought after recently. The Fujifilm pre-owned market at the moment is actually quite big, and that's the reason why we keep covering used Fujifilm cameras, I guess. But with that, you've got a really powerful camera that actually takes some really great quality photos. And like I said, the image quality that I've actually managed to get out of it, at least so far, has been pretty fantastic. So it does actually film in full HD at 60p. So you haven't got any 4Ks in this, but you don't necessarily need a 4K camera to get some great quality video. Sometimes you can get some great quality video even if the camera can't do 4K. The camera was actually released back in 2013, so this is a 12-year-old APS-C camera, with the first generation of this camera actually being, I believe, the second mirrorless camera that Fujifilm actually released, and look how far that they've come. When I do find it with the older Fujifilm cameras, they are actually a lot slower to use, but with this, it does actually seem fast and really quite responsive, being able to take pretty much all of the photos that I really want to. And although the autofocus isn't necessarily perfect, and it's something Fujifilm are still working on today, is the autofocus, it does feel pretty good. And like I said, a lot of the photos I've taken with it, I've actually come away from and actually been like, this actually looks pretty good. It's got a style that I certainly like about it. The other side is, I've got to say that the EVF is nice and bright, and it's actually very clear. It's not the crazy powerful EVFs that we have today, but it is a 2.36 million dot OLED EVF that I actually really appreciate with the cameras I shoot with. Welcome to the end of the video. I've just finished the main edit, and this is more of a chance for me to go over the photos that I have taken, but also talk a little bit more detail as my general opinion and come to that good old conclusion that everyone loves to hear. At the moment, I've got my iPad right in front of me so I can have a look at the images whilst I talk about them, and this first image is perhaps my favourite from the sort of like city road shoot that I did. The general goal of this image was to get the sort of curvature of the traffic lights in with the building and use it as a way to frame up a subject directly in front of the door. I waited for a little while for it and it came out pretty well. Zooming into the shot, as you can see, the far foreground kind of becomes a little bit of a mushy mess. That's because it's actually focused here on the actual traffic lights themselves, which, you know, may not have actually been perfect for this particular shot. The camera is ultimately just a 16 megapixel sensor, but I will say the images you just get out of it in general feel very natural and very film-like in their kind of like composition, and overall I feel like they look actually really good. And talking on that, I feel like you can get some really great photos even when you're not really trying to. This next This next photograph that I have here is just taken on the traffic lights. What I liked about this is you got the traffic light kind of like leaning towards him, and then he's leaning and looking at his phone. What I decided to do here is a little bit different from what I usually do with photography, and actually make it quite bright and a sort of like you know, a different way of doing my general street photography, where I usually play with a lot of the light in the subject. This is really quite clean. I would crop it a little bit. And on that note, the 16 megapixels does allow you to do that, at least to a certain extent. Although the autofocus isn't particularly fantastic, it does work, and when I'm doing street photography or just general snapshots, I feel like it does actually grab the focus pretty well. My honest opinion, some of the photos here actually came out pretty decent, even with a camera that's now 12 years old now. And you can see why it's worth that sort of like £300, £400, £500 kind of like price mark, especially when you decide to pair it up with a lens. Now for the shoot, I actually paired it up with the 18mm f2.8, which gave me a nice decent wide, and because it's an APS-C size sensor, it came out more equivalent to a 24mm in its focal length, and it was still quite pocketable. What I was aiming to do is actually give this as close kind of like reach to an X100 or something around to have a nice small compact camera that I could take photos of on the street. And I think this is actually a really viable solution, especially if you weren't necessarily too happy with the fact the XM5 in particular didn't have a viewfinder. This offers a decent alternative with the ability to take some really great photos. Of course, if you are looking to get into sort of like a starting Fuji camera, actually spending a little bit more money on the lenses is actually going to end up giving you ultimately better photos, because when it comes to shooting photography just in general, the main thing that matters is the lens. The sensor is just what generates the image. So this is a nice Suzuki here, and I've actually found a number of these sort of like retro bikes or cars recently, which I actually enjoyed shooting. This one came out really quite well. There's a decent amount of detail both in the shadow as well as the highlight, and overall that's a photo there that I'd be quite happy to post on social media. And just in general, the camera produces really nice filmic looking images. And for example, when it came to this lovely lady who was taking a box of bananas somewhere, this was a shot that I took really quickly, and in that kind of like expectation, I wasn't actually thinking I was going to get the shot out of it. Now there were a number of photos that I took which ended up being out of focus because the focus didn't react fast enough. But what I would say is when it does capture it, it captures it properly, and with this particular photo I was quite happy with. It actually focused more on her than it did on the bananas box, and overall in terms of a street photo, I'm actually quite happy with it, and I feel like the X-E2 really excels in that form factor in particular. The other thing that I did notice, because as with street photography, you are kind of like getting to a certain extent up in somebody else's grill, and you want to make sure you don't disturb their kind of like zen as well as your own. So making sure that the cameras aren't as imposing as possible is quite important. And that's something else I would say about the X-E2, is that it's not particularly imposing. You still look like some sort of crazed tourist, and especially when I'm walking around with a giant stick going up my shoulder, holding up the X-E5 and the Pocket 3 here, looking around, it's nice just to know that most people will generally ignore me. Anyway, so this was a quick snapshot that I took of a coffee shop, and as you can see, pretty sharp throughout the range, especially for this 16 megapixel sensor. The colors are really great. There's still got quite a lot of detail in the shadows, but the highlights is where this kind of image kind of comes together in this particular case. And overall, you know, I can quite happily say I would be very happy using an X-E2 for my day-to-day shooting, and it's actually a little bit of a tempting process because it's something that I've been looking at. It's a small, nice, light, compact in order for me to do some shooting with. Kind of to come back around now for the conclusion of this video, the X-E2 is a nice kind of like camera to go for if you're looking for a place to really start in the Fujifilm lineup, and you can see one of these coming in second hand like this one did, and you should grab it, especially if it's from Camera Centre UK. Colours are great, although it's a 16 megapixel sensor, that doesn't really matter. You get some really great photos. You can't really crop and enhance that much, but if you are focusing on improving your photography or just something for a day-to-day shoot, you just want something to take photos to post, I do believe this camera excels in just creating really nice images. And I would ultimately recommend it to you. If you like this video, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in down below. Have a good day.